The war did not begin with an explosion. It began with silence, a silence so deep that even the stars seemed to hold their breath. The coalition fleets had gathered above the blue planet called Earth, watching, waiting, calculating. For centuries, the coalition had studied humanity. They saw humans as emotional, fragile, and inefficient. When the first human colony ship crossed into restricted space, the coalition decided the species needed to be controlled. What they did not expect was resistance. Human ships were smaller, weaker on paper, and far fewer. Yet when the first shots were fired, the humans did not retreat. They advanced. Their pilots ignored survival odds. Their commanders broke every known tactical rule. In less than an hour, 3 coalition cruisers were destroyed. That was when the galaxy realized this would not be a short war. Among the coalition forces was a warrior known as Karzan. He was not just a soldier, he was a symbol. Massive, panther-shaped, covered in glowing blue markings, Karzan had led victories across dozens of systems. His species valued logic above all else. Mercy was considered a flaw. Emotion was a weakness. Karzan believed this deeply until the day he met humanity in battle. The battle above Earth lasted 7 brutal hours. Human ships burned, coalition vessels fell. Space was filled with debris and frozen bodies. Near the end, Karzan's command ship was struck by a human weapon designed to overload shields from the inside. The blast tore through the hull. Karzan survived, but barely. His body was broken, his systems failing. Coalition medics recovered him and rushed him to a medical station orbiting a neutral moon. The doctors worked quickly, but their faces showed no hope. Karzan's injuries were beyond standard recovery. His nervous system was damaged. His bioluminescent patterns flickered, a sign of approaching death. The medical council observed in silence as the data appeared on the screens. Probability of survival was less than 1%. They declared him lost. Coalition protocol was clear. Resources were not wasted on the dying. Life support was reduced to minimum levels. The room grew quiet again. Karzan drifted in and out of awareness, sensing the cold logic of his people abandoning him. He did not feel anger, only confusion. He had served perfectly. Why did survival now require compassion? Unseen by most of the station, a human evacuation shuttle docked under white flag status. It carried refugees rescued from a damaged orbital habitat. Among them was a small human child named Emily. She was 7 years old, quiet and observant. Her parents had not survived the battle. Coalition officials allowed the humans temporary shelter until transport could be arranged. Emily wandered the corridors while adults argued with alien officers. She followed the soft hum of machines until she reached the medical wing. No one stopped her. To the coalition, a child was irrelevant. She stood outside a transparent barrier and saw Karzan. The massive alien lay still, connected to glowing machines. His chest rose slowly. His light patterns were dim but not gone. Emily felt something tighten in her chest. She did not know why, she only knew he was alone. Slowly, she raised her small hand and placed it against the barrier. Inside the chamber, Karzan felt something warm, not physical warmth, but something deeper. His fading senses caught a strange signal, not pain, not data, presence. With great effort, he opened one eye. He saw the child. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, but with concern. She leaned closer to the barrier and whispered words the translators did not record. "Don't leave me." The words should have meant nothing, yet Karzan's failing systems reacted. His heart rate stabilized slightly. The blue markings on his body glowed just a bit brighter. Medical alarms flickered, confused. Coalition doctors stared at their screens in disbelief. Outside the chamber, officers argued. Some demanded the child be removed. Others insisted the readings were errors. The machines could not explain what was happening, and that frightened them more than enemy weapons. The war had taught them humans were dangerous, but this was different. This was quiet, gentle, and impossible. Emily kept her hand against the barrier. She did not speak again. She simply stayed. In her mind, leaving felt wrong. She remembered holding her mother's hand when the alarms had sounded. She remembered the fear. She did not want this alien to feel that same fear alone. Karzan felt the warmth grow stronger. His thoughts slowed, then steadied. Images surfaced, not of battle, but of standing under a strange blue sky unarmed. His species had no word for comfort, yet something close to it filled his chest. The medical system recalculated. Survival probability rose to 2%. No one noticed the number change at first, but the war and the galaxy had just taken its first step toward something neither side understood. For the first time since the war began, the coalition faced a problem that could not be solved with firepower or logic. A human child had altered the fate of a living weapon without touching a control or issuing a command. The station logs recorded the moment but classified it as an anomaly. Deep within the medical chamber, Carson's breathing became steadier, slow but real. Emily finally lowered her hand, feeling tired yet calm. Guards arrived seconds later and gently guided her away. She did not resist. As she was taken down the corridor, she looked back once. The alien's eye was still open, watching her. In that silent exchange, something fragile but powerful was born. Neither the coalition nor humanity understood it yet, but the war had already changed forever. The stars outside continued to burn cold and distant, unaware that hope had entered the battlefield not as a weapon, but as a whisper carried by a child who refused to walk away from the dying. That single moment would echo through fleets, species, and history itself. The war would never change. Carson did not wake all at once. Consciousness returned in slow waves like light pushing back darkness. Sounds came first, a steady hum. Soft beeps, then sensation. His body felt heavy, broken, yet no longer falling apart. Pain existed, but it was distant, controlled. That alone was impossible. He should have been dead. Medical drones hovered around him, adjusting fields and energy lines. The coalition doctors stood behind transparent panels, their expressions tense. They had reduced life support hours ago. No advanced procedure had been approved. Yet Carson's vital signs were stable, weak but stable. The data made no sense. A senior medic spoke quietly. Explain the change. No one answered. The system showed gradual regeneration in damaged neural paths. Not repair but resistance to collapse. Something had slowed the dying process. According to all known science, it should not happen. Carson opened his eyes fully. The chamber lights felt harsh. His instincts told him to rise to assess threats, but his body refused. He remembered battle, the explosion, then darkness. And then the child. The memory was clear, too clear. Her voice had not gone through translators. He had understood it anyway. The sound had bypassed logic and struck something deeper. His species believed emotion was noise, a flaw to be removed. Yet that sound had brought order, not chaos. Outside the chamber, a council meeting was already underway. The presence of humans aboard the station was being reconsidered. Some demanded their immediate removal. Others argued that the child's presence was linked to the anomaly. That idea alone caused discomfort. The coalition did not like unknown variables, especially small, fragile ones they could not control. Emily sat in a quiet room guarded by 2 coalition officers. The room was cold, metallic, and empty except for a bench and a light panel. She swung her feet slowly, staring at the floor. No one had explained why she was moved or where she would go next. She felt tired but not afraid. Her thoughts kept returning to the alien in the medical chamber. She wondered if he was still alive. An officer entered and crouched slightly, trying to appear less intimidating. "Human child," the translator said. "Why did you approach the injured warrior?" Emily looked up. He was alone. "That is not an answer," the officer replied. She frowned. "It is." The officer paused. He had no response prepared for that. Coalition logic expected reasons tied to outcomes, not feelings. He left the room without another word. Hours passed. In the medical chamber, Carson's condition improved by small but measurable margins. The bioluminescent patterns on his body no longer flickered randomly. They pulsed in slow, steady rhythms. The machines adapted automatically, feeding energy where his body resisted decay. A junior medic finally spoke what others feared to say. "The human child may be a stabilizing factor." Silence followed. "That suggests emotional influence," another replied. "That is not a recognized medical mechanism." "Neither is recovery from this level of damage," the junior medic answered. The council ordered controlled observation. Emily was brought to the edge of the medical wing again, this time under strict supervision. A barrier remained between her and Carson. No contact allowed, no words encouraged. Emily did not run this time. She walked calmly to the barrier and placed her hand against it again. She smiled a little when she saw the alien's eyes open. Carson felt it immediately. The warmth returned, stronger than before. His breathing deepened. Pain faded further into the background. His mind, once sharp and cold, began to form unfamiliar thoughts. He wondered what the child was called. He wondered why her presence mattered. Those questions had no tactical value, yet they refused to disappear. Medical alarms shifted again. Survival probability reached 5%. The council could no longer deny the pattern. "This is unacceptable," one commander said. "We cannot rely on a human child to preserve one of our greatest warriors." "But we are," another replied, "whether we approve or not." The war outside continued. Reports arrived of human counterattacks. Supply lines disrupted. Entire coalition strategies failed due to unpredictable human behavior. The same trait that confused the coalition on the battlefield was now present in a hospital room. Emily stayed for hours. Sometimes she spoke softly, telling simple stories about Earth, about rain, about animals, about her mother. The translators did not fully capture her words, but Karzan understood more than he should have. The meaning reached him without translation. He began to respond, not with words but with movement, a slight lift of his paw, a slow tilt of his head. The child noticed and laughed quietly. That sound caused another surge of stability in his systems. Coalition science struggled to keep up. A new decision was made, classified, risky. The council authorized limited continued exposure. Not because they believed in compassion, but because they believed in results. If the human child was a tool, they would use her. That thought never crossed Emily's mind. To her, the alien was no longer a soldier or an enemy. He was someone who needed her to stay. As days passed, Karzan's condition crossed a critical threshold. He was no longer dying. He was recovering, slowly but truly. The impossible had become undeniable. Deep within him, something else was changing. His loyalty to the coalition remained, but it was no longer blind. He had experienced something beyond command and duty. A connection not built by hierarchy or force. When Emily was finally escorted away for rest, Karzan felt the absence sharply. His systems remained stable, but the warmth dimmed. He realized then that survival was no longer just a function of machines. It was tied to her presence. For the first time in his long service, Karzan feared something other than death. He feared losing her. The coalition believed they were controlling the situation. They did not yet understand that the war had created something far more dangerous than a weapon. It had created a bond, and once formed, it could not be easily broken. The coalition station changed after Karzan began to recover. Not in structure or design, but in behavior. Guards walked slower near the medical wing. Doctors spoke in lower tones. Something about the warriors' survival unsettled them. It challenged rules they had followed all their lives. Karzan could now move his head freely. His vision sharpened each cycle. The pain that once drowned his thoughts had become a quiet echo. Machines still surrounded him, but they no longer fought death. They supported healing. Every reading confirmed it. He was alive because something unknown had intervened. That unknown had a name. Emily. She visited every day, always under watch, always limited in time, yet every moment mattered. When she arrived, Karzan's bioluminescent markings brightened naturally, not in the defensive patterns of combat, but in something closer to calm. The medical staff recorded it, unable to explain it. Emily talked. She talked about small things, earth things. She described sunlight through leaves, the smell of rain, the sound of birds in the morning. Karzan listened. His species did not use imagination, they remembered facts. Yet her words formed images in his mind that felt real. Outside the medical wing, the war grew worse. Human forces had adapted again. They learned coalition attack rhythms and broke them. They used damaged ships as traps. They rescued civilians in the middle of battles, even when it cost them advantage. Coalition commanders labeled this behavior irrational. Human commanders called it necessary. The Coalition Council met again. This time the discussion was not about Karzan's survival, it was about risk. If he recovers fully, one voice said, his loyalty may be compromised. That is speculation, another replied. So was survival. They watched through the observation window as Emily pressed her hand to the barrier and smiled. Karzan lifted his paw and placed it opposite hers. The barrier shimmered between them. Humans change things by existing, a council member said quietly. A decision formed, cold and efficient. Emily was taken from the station that night. No explanation was given to her. She was placed on a transport with other human survivors, told she was going somewhere safe. She asked if she could say goodbye. The answer was no. Protocol did not allow emotional complications. Karzan felt it before anyone told him. The warmth vanished. His systems destabilized slightly. Alarms sounded. Medics rushed in, adjusting fields. They succeeded, but something essential was missing. Recovery slowed. Not reversed but weakened. He asked his first spoken question since the battle. "Where is the child?" The room went silent. A medic answered carefully. "The human has been relocated." "Why?" No one replied. That silence hurt more than his injuries ever had. Days passed. Emily was gone. Curzon healed, but not as before. His strength returned unevenly. His thoughts became restless. He replayed memories of the child's voice, her calm presence. He realized something unsettling. He missed her. That realization frightened him. His species did not miss. They did not attach. They replaced losses with efficiency, yet his mind resisted that logic. The absence felt wrong. On Earth, the Human War Council received new intelligence. Coalition morale showed instability. Medical anomalies were reported. Human analysts noticed a pattern. A high-ranking enemy warrior survived against all odds after exposure to a human child. A human commander spoke. "They're learning what we already know." Another asked, "What's that?" "That humans don't fight alone." "Not really." Emily arrived at a temporary human refuge station. She was safe, fed, and monitored, but she was not happy. She asked about the alien every day. No one had answers. At night, she dreamed of glowing blue light fading in darkness. Back on the Coalition station, Curzon made a choice. Against medical advice, he stood. His legs trembled, but they held. The machines protested, but he ignored them. Guards moved, unsure whether to stop him. He did not threaten. He simply walked. He walked out of the chamber. The council reacted immediately. Security alerts spread through the station. Curzon moved slowly, but with purpose. He went to the observation deck where the stars were visible. He looked out at space and made a realization that would have been impossible weeks ago. The war was no longer his highest priority. The child was. He turned back toward the interior of the station, toward command levels. He needed answers, not orders, not strategies, truth. Behind him, alarms echoed. Ahead of him, Coalition authority waited. For the first time in his life, Curzon was walking not as a weapon, but as an individual. And that terrified the Coalition far more than any human fleet ever had. Curzon did not stop when the guards blocked the corridor. They raised their weapons, hands unsteady. They had trained their entire lives to follow his commands, not to stand in his way. He did not attack. He did not roar. He simply looked at them. "Move," he said. There was no threat in his voice, only certainty. The guards stepped aside. Word spread quickly through the station. The great warrior was walking freely. Not raging, not broken, calm. That alone was enough to shake the Coalition's confidence. Curzon reached the command level and entered the council chamber without permission. The council members froze. "You removed the child," Curzon said. "You did not tell me." One council member answered, keeping their voice controlled. "The human was a variable. Variables are removed. She was keeping me alive." "That is not proven." Curzon stepped closer. The lights reflected off his glowing markings, brighter now than they had ever been in battle. "I am standing here, that is proof." Silence filled the chamber. "She is human," another council member said. "Our enemy." "She is a child," Curzon replied. "She never carried a weapon, she never spoke of war, she only stayed." The council exchanged looks. This was not a discussion they had prepared for. Curzon had never questioned an order before. He had never spoken like this. "You are compromised," the council leader said. "Your judgment is altered." "Yes," Curzon said, "it is improved." That statement shocked them more than any act of violence could have. The council ordered Curzon confined. Security moved in, but this time not all guards obeyed immediately. Hesitation spread. Curzon did not resist when restraint fields activated, but he did not lower his gaze. "Bring her back," he said calmly, "or I will no longer fight for you." The room erupted in protest. "You cannot make demands," one shouted. "I already have," Curzon answered. The war reports arrived the same day. Human fleets had broken through another Coalition defense line. Losses were heavy. Curzon's absence from command was noticed. His strategies had shaped entire campaigns. Without him, the Coalition was weaker. The Council faced a choice they never expected. On the human refuge station, Emily sat by a window watching stars pass slowly. She held a small object in her hand, a simple stone she had carried from Earth. It was the only thing that felt familiar. She felt something was wrong, like a quiet ache in her chest. She did not know why. A human officer approached her gently. "Emily, there's someone who wants to see you." "Who?" she asked. "An ally," the officer said carefully. The transport was quiet. When Emily entered the Coalition station again, fear tried to rise, but it did not win. She remembered the warmth. She remembered the glowing light. They brought her to the medical wing. Curzon was waiting. When their eyes met, the change was instant. His posture eased. The lights on his body brightened naturally. Emily smiled, relief flooding her face. "I thought you were gone," she said. "I waited," he replied. Medical readings surged again, stronger than ever. Recovery accelerated beyond previous levels. Coalition scientists could no longer deny reality. The child's presence was not a coincidence. It was a catalyst. The council watched from behind the barrier. Their greatest warrior was healing faster than predicted. But worse, he was changing. Curzon began to learn beyond battle. Emily asked questions. He answered honestly. She asked why the war started. He had no good answer. That realization stayed with him. News of the anomaly reached human leadership fully. The idea spread quickly through human ranks, not as a weapon but as a truth. Humans did not dominate through strength alone. They connected. A ceasefire request came days later. Limited, temporary. The coalition needed time. Humans agreed cautiously. They wanted answers too. During the ceasefire, Curzon was allowed supervised interaction with Emily. The supervision became lighter with time. Trust, once broken, was slowly rebuilt. Emily taught Curzon a human game using simple shapes. He failed at first. She laughed. He tried again. Each attempt felt like training for something new, something not defined by combat. One night, Curzon spoke to the council again. "The war will end," he said. "Not because we win, but because we must." "That is not our way," the council leader replied. "It is now," Curzon said, "or we lose everything." The council feared him now, but they also needed him. And they feared the humans even more, not for their weapons, but for their influence. As the ceasefire held, something unprecedented happened. Coalition soldiers watched humans repair damaged ships without being asked. They saw humans share food. They saw them sit beside injured enemies without judgment. Logic began to crack. Emily slept in a safe room near the medical wing. Curzon stood guard outside, not because he was ordered to, but because he chose to. He realized then that protection did not require command. It required presence. The war had not ended yet, but it had slowed. And in that pause, something far more powerful than any fleet was growing. Understanding. The coalition had tried to remove a variable. Instead, they had discovered the reason they were losing. And for the first time, they understood that humanity's greatest strength was not its ability to fight. It was its refusal to abandon anyone. The ceasefire did not bring peace. It brought tension. Fleets stayed in place. Weapons remained charged. Both sides waited, unsure which mistake would restart the war. But something had already changed, and everyone could feel it. Curzon was no longer confined to the medical wing. He walked the station freely now, though always watched. Coalition soldiers stepped aside when he passed, not out of fear but uncertainty. He no longer looked like the perfect weapon they had followed for years. He looked like something new. Emily stayed close to him, not because she was told to, but because she wanted to. She followed him through observation halls and quiet corridors. Sometimes they said nothing. Sometimes she talked and he listened. That was enough. Human and coalition officers began meeting face to face. The talks were difficult. Old wounds, destroyed worlds, and lost lives filled the air. Anger was present, but so was exhaustion. Both sides had lost too much. A coalition commander finally asked the question no one wanted to say out loud. "Why do humans care so much about individuals?" A human officer answered simply, "Because every individual matters." The commander did not argue. He did not fully understand, but he could no longer ignore the evidence standing behind the human delegation. Curzon was alive because someone had stayed. Not all coalition leaders accepted this change. A secret faction formed within the council. They believed Curzon was compromised beyond repair. To them, Emily was not a child. She was a threat, a symbol of weakness spreading through their ranks. They planned quietly, waiting for the right moment. That moment came during a joint inspection of a damaged station sector. An explosion tore through the corridor. Alarms screamed. Smoke filled the air. The blast was controlled, precise, not meant to destroy the station. Meant to create chaos. Emily was thrown to the floor. Curzon reacted instantly. He placed himself between her and the fire, shielding her with his body. Debris struck his back. Pain returned sharply, but he did not move. Security rushed in. Human and coalition soldiers worked together without orders. Fires were contained. Injuries treated. Emily was shaken but unharmed. Curzon was injured again. The medical team worked fast, but this time the damage was severe. His recovery had been incomplete. His body struggled. The familiar readings returned, critical, unstable. The council demanded answers. Evidence surfaced quickly. Internal sabotage. Coalition signatures. The faction was exposed, arrested, removed, but the damage was done. Emily stood outside the medical chamber again, just like the first time. Her hands shook as she pressed them against the barrier. "Please," she whispered. "I'm here." The machine stabilized slightly, but not enough. Carson's body was fighting, but it was losing. The doctors exchanged looks filled with fear, not of failure, but of what failure would mean now. Humans watched silently. One human scientist spoke carefully. "He's not just reacting to her presence anymore, he's choosing to fight." That distinction mattered. Emily spoke softly, telling him about the sky on Earth at night. About how stars looked closer when you believed someone was watching them with you. Her voice broke, but she did not stop. Carson heard her, not clearly, not fully, but enough. He remembered every battle he had survived, every order he had followed. None of that gave him strength now. What gave him strength was the idea that leaving would hurt someone who cared. His heart stabilized. The blue markings flared, brighter than ever before. Recovery began again, slower this time, but real. The attempt on his life changed everything. The coalition could no longer deny the truth. Their own people had tried to silence it. Humanity's influence was not a weakness. It was a force that reshaped loyalty, purpose, and even biology. The ceasefire became formal talks. Borders were discussed. Reparations considered, shared recovery efforts planned. The war ended without a final battle. There was no great explosion, no last heroic charge. Instead, there was a message sent across every channel, every system, every fleet. The coalition and humanity had signed a full ceasefire. Not temporary, not conditional, final. Ships powered down weapons. Fleets slowly pulled back. For the first time in generations, the stars were quiet. Carson stood in the main council chamber, fully healed. Scars remained, but they no longer weakened him. They reminded him. The blue markings on his body glowed steadily, not with battle readiness, but with calm purpose. Emily stood beside him, holding his claw like it was the most natural thing in the galaxy. The Coalition Council spoke first. Their voices were no longer cold. "The war has shown us our limits," the council leader said. "Logic alone was not enough. We nearly destroyed ourselves because we refused to understand." A human representative nodded. "Understanding doesn't erase pain," she said, "but it stops it from repeating." Carson stepped forward. "I was declared lost," he said. "Beyond saving, my people walked away because that was our way. A human child did not, because that is humanity's way." The chamber was silent. "I will not return to the battlefield," Carson continued. "I will serve as a bridge between us if you accept that." The council accepted. A new role was created that day, not soldier, not commander, guardian, liaison, symbol. Carson became the first of his kind to stand for something other than war. Emily was asked what she wanted. She thought for a long moment. "I want to stay," she said, "with him." The humans agreed. The coalition hesitated, then agreed as well. No protocol existed for this, but no one wanted to be the one to say no. The galaxy had already learned the cost of that choice. Months passed. Rebuilding began. Human engineers and coalition scientists worked together. Old enemies shared knowledge. Some wounds healed quickly. Others took time, but the fighting did not return. Emily went to school on a shared station, learning about stars, languages, and worlds she had never imagined. Carson walked her there every day. Other children stared at first, then waved. Soon it became normal. One evening they stood by a viewing window watching a peaceful fleet drift past. "Are you glad you stayed?" Emily asked. "Yes," Carson said without hesitation, "even though you were a warrior." "Especially because I was," he replied.